we've been in this series on fables for families, and we've been talking about family systems and things like that. So you've gotten a different story every week, and I'm going to give you another one today. This is the last in the series, but it's story time with Pastor Bob. Here we go. See if you can relate to this story. One day, Harry decided to improve his wife's tennis game. Not that she cared that much. He started by buying the latest how-to books and tapes. He left magazine articles lying around, hoping she'd read them. He even hired a coach, but she did not seem to learn or progress. Her game remained consistent, though curiously she seemed to make better contact with her backhand. As time went by, Harry's wife started to regress. She had more and more trouble getting up for it. She would become sick or have a pain just before a game. She tired easily. She began to withdraw. Then she hurt her arm after failing to follow through. It took her a year to recover. When her arm got better, Harry decided to make a breakthrough. He would teach his wife himself. He bought her a new racket, one that was nice and light, with a grip she would not find painful, as she had often complained. He found shoes advertised to not make her feet sweat, another complaint, tennis shorts that were not too long or short, and socks that didn't make her feet itch. He even bought tennis balls with extra bounce and arranged for a private court where they could play at a time most convenient for her. In short, Harry had taken away every reason his wife had ever given why she had been distracted, seemed listless, or was out of shape. One perfect morning, Harry took his wife to the court. She didn't seem excited about the idea. In fact, she developed a slight headache, but she went. And on the way over, Harry realized that she had taken her old racket and forgotten to wear all the new apparel that he had bought her. As soon as they got to the court, Harry walked over to her position, reviewed with her how to stand, how to place her feet, bend her knees, hold her arm, etc., all the things he had gone over with her the night before. She silently allowed him to correct her, though she did ask once how long they thought they would be there. After some more instruction, Harry bounded to the other side of the court and said, "Ready, dear?" And then he lobbed a serve over the net. It passed by her unmolested. After some more instruction, Harry bounded to the other side of the court and said, What happened?" "Well, I wasn't ready," she said. He hit another. She barely moved awkwardly to return the ball, but it went harmlessly and weakly into the net. "What's the matter?" Harry asked. "Just not feeling up to it today," she said. "I'm trying to help you, not hurt you," Harry said. Okay, she said. "Go ahead." He was about to serve a third time when he noticed where she was standing. So he went over and corrected her once more. "Set?" he asked. And without waiting for a reply, which was not going to come anyway, he hit another, slightly harder than he intended. The ball bounced perfectly, drawn seemingly to the strings of her racket almost like a magnet, and she returned his serve. It zoomed off to her right, caromed off an old wooden bench, and ricocheted around in the corner of a fence. Not wanting to discourage his wife, Harry shouted, "Good power! Try to follow through a little more across your body." "Don't you think we should paint the house this year rather than next?" she said. Thwack! Harry's next serve went over the net, and his wife returned it this time, sending it screaming over the fence behind Harry. "Well, you can really put a lot on it," said Harry. "Try again." Smash! It came right back, a real zinger this time, right into the middle of the net. "Good zip," said Harry. "Try angling it up a bit. You've almost got it." Thus the volley continued. Harry would remind his wife how to stand. He'd run over to her side of the court to demonstrate the principles of racket technique, and then run back to his side of the court to prepare for some dreamed of reciprocity from a well-placed serve. Each time his wife would send the ball, however, randomly on its own willful way. "Don't you want to play?" he finally asked. She gave a slight shrug of the shoulders. "You don't seem interested." "Well, this was your idea, you know," she replied. "Yes, but it's for you. That is, for us," Harry broke off. Harry knew that the game was more than skill or physical prowess. He was fully aware that playing well involved many emotional factors, self-control, for example, self-esteem, self-reliance. That playing well included the capacity to be assertive, yet regulate one's intensity. That the bottom line of success was mental toughness to respond to a challenge. These were lessons that could not only be applied to tennis, but to life itself. So Harry resolved to be the kind of teacher who was sympathetic, encouraging, and supportive no matter what. He resolved never to guilt her and to always show that he loved her despite her faults. For he wanted her to feel valued, and after all, the ultimate end was not how she ranked, but fun. So he decided on a new tack. I think she needs more guidance during the act itself, he thought. So Harry served a high lob, underhanded, designed to bounce up right before her. Then he ran around to her side of the court, turned her shoulders in the right direction, held her arm with his hand, and guided the racket with just the right angle and speed to lob it back. He took off again. He beat the ball to his side of the court and lobbed it once again to hers. Ran back to her, held her arm just right, and guided the racket in the true path once more. Again, he started back to his side of the net, but it wasn't necessary. The ball had hit the racket wood and bounced aimlessly away. He tried his new approach once more, lobbed the ball, beat it to the other side, held her arm just right, aimed the racket true, but the ball crashed into the net. On the next, they sent it over the baseline, and the third time she wasn't ready, so they missed making any contact at all. Harry stood at the other end of the court dumbfounded, reminding himself of his vows of patience. His wife stood on her end, wondering when she'd be out of the sun. What would it take to improve her game? He had taught her all the theory, all about technique. He had ensured the best surroundings, obtained the finest equipment. She possessed all the natural resources. And then suddenly Harry stopped asking. Slowly he began to walk in a little circle. He bounced the ball vigorously a few times, wiped the racket handle of any sweat, positioned himself properly for a serve, and then, after glancing slightly to his right and left, he hit it with all his might. Not directly toward his wife, but up. Up and up it rose, and when it came down on her side, he was over there himself, ready for the return. Up he hit it toward his side. He was back there when it came down. Once more, he batted the ball high into the blue so that he might have time to get under the return. So their match continued forever and a day. And never again did Harry let it bounce on her end of the court. The end. Anybody relating to this? Nervous laughter? Men and women looking at each other this morning? With whom do you identify? I'm guessing that this one hits home, and that's why I chose it for the last in this particular part of the series. Whether you feel like Harry trying to motivate someone else, or whether you're like Harry's wife who would rather be anywhere else, this story speaks. We've been talking about emotional processes in families throughout this series, and in some ways, this last fable invites us to think about everything we've been learning. We've learned about self-differentiation, about dealing with touchy people, about the problem of emotional triangles, the trap of perfectionism, the importance of maintaining boundaries. In each fable, we've been reminded, first, that the only person you can control, the only person you can make responsible is yourself. When we try to make others responsible, we can find ourselves frustrated, and we can frustrate those around us. That can lead to unhealthy patterns that Friedman calls overfunctioning or underfunctioning. Now, the overfunctioner is a person whose whole focus is on making others responsible while believing that they are the ones stuck with all the responsibility. Overfunctioners tend to have a martyr's view of the world. No one else is being responsible, so I have to do it. No one remembers the overfunctioner's birthday, and they let everybody know that. They get all the blame and none of the credit. They're the ones on whom all the work and responsibility gets dumped. As the old saying goes, if you want something done quickly, you don't give it to the person with the cleanest desk, you give it to the one with the messiest desk. Overfunctioners, many of whom are perfectionists also, by the way, manifest their anxiety through ceaseless activity, and want to make sure everyone else is overfunctioning as well. They become obsessed with the salvation of others rather than their own. They are thus more prone to burnout, isolation, and stress-related illness. In other words, they're like Harry, keeping the ball in the air while running back and forth across the court in a wild sweat. They've collected all the information, they've provided all the tools, they've given everyone all the impetus they need to play the game of life. They'll demonstrate their competence, they'll try to motivate others, but ultimately they fall exhausted. They forget the maxim that we learned in this series earlier, that the unmotivated are invulnerable to insight. The classic biblical example of this is Moses. Now, remember earlier in the series we saw Moses as a more self-differentiated leader in Exodus 32, the story about the golden calf. But it took Moses some time to get there. Before he started to differentiate, Moses was a classic overfunctioner. In Numbers 11, for example, soon after the Israelites departed Egypt, the people are complaining and Moses is overfunctioning, trying to make them responsible. It's not working, however, and their complaints and passivity get worse. And this leads to Moses exploding at God. Numbers 11, verse 10. Moses heard the people of every family wailing at the entrance of their tents. The Lord became exceedingly angry, and Moses was troubled. He asked the Lord, "Why have you brought this trouble on your servant? What have I done to displease you that you put the burden of all these people on me? Did I conceive of all these people? Did I give them birth? Why do you tell me to carry them in my arms as a nurse carries an infant to the land you promised on oath to their ancestors? Where can I get meat for all these people? They keep wailing to me, 'Give us meat to eat.' I can't carry these people by myself. The burden is too heavy for me. If this is how you're going to treat me, please go ahead and kill me if I have found favor in your eyes, and do not let me face my own ruin." That's a classic rant right there. That's a classic overfunctioner rant. It's all on me. Why did you do this? Moses blames God, but notice Moses has taken on all the responsibility for these people. He now sees himself as the overfunctioning martyr, exhausted, burnt out, ready to die. That's quite the contrast from the Moses we see later, who stands in the gap between the people and God. Well, God's response is to get Moses some help by putting his spirit into some of the elders. Now, we get a different version of that in Exodus 18. It's Moses' father-in-law, Jethro, who gives him some sage advice about his overfunctioning. I love the story of Jethro. We don't know a lot about him. What I do know about Jethro is that he's a patron saint, kind of one of the leading figures in the Druze religion, which is based there in Israel. In fact, a few years ago, I was hiking the Jesus Trail with a friend named Chris, and we stopped at the Druze shrine because you could go and visit the tomb of Jethro, who's a revered figure. Well, to visit the tomb, you have to go and you have to put on a special robe. You have to wash your hands a certain way. It takes 15, 20 minutes just to get ready to go in for the tour of Jethro's tomb. So I went through all this. Chris is like, "I'm not doing that." So he sits outside, and I get all ready to go into the tour, and the guide takes me in, and he takes me into this large room. It's about as big as our room here. And in the middle, there's a sarcophagus with a green cloth over it. And I'm waiting for the tour. Here's what the tour guide said. He walked up to the sarcophagus, and he said, "Jethro." That was the tour. Jethro. So that's what I know about Jethro. But in this case, he is helping Moses get the idea that overfunctioning is not good. Go to Exodus 18, verse 18. He says to Moses, who's been taking on all of the anxiety of the people, he says, "You and these people who come to you will only wear yourselves out. The work is too heavy for you. You can't handle it alone. Listen now to me, and I will give you some advice. And may God be with you. You must be the people's representative before God and bring their disputes to him. Teach them his decrees and instructions and show them the way they are to live and how they are to behave. But select capable men from all the people, men who fear God, trustworthy men, who hate dishonest gain, and appoint them as officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. Have them serve as judges for the people at all times. But have them bring every difficult case to you. The simple cases they can decide themselves. That will make your load lighter because they will share it with you. If you do this, and God so commands, you'll be able to stand the strain, and all these people will go home satisfied. See, Jethro reminds Moses that his job isn't to be responsible for every person, to make every person responsible, but rather to be responsible for his own position as leader and representative. He's responsible for himself and his role, and he needs to delegate the rest. You might wonder what Jethro would say to Harry in our story. Looking at this ridiculous tennis match, I'm guessing he would say, "What you're doing is not good. Why are you taking responsibility for your wife's tennis game when she has no interest? Why are you burning yourself out in something that doesn't really matter?" Do you think any of Harry's instruction was actually going to motivate his wife to play tennis? No. Notice that nowhere in the story does she ask him for help. It is not her idea. She has all the tools, just not the motivation. Harry decided for her, decided to fix her, and he was going to do it even if he killed himself. Overfunctioners want to make everyone in the room, in the system, responsible. But the irony is that the more responsibility they take on in the family system, the less motivated the others in the system become. Why should Harry's wife play, after all, if he's going to do it for her? And what about Harry's wife? She's ostensibly the underfunctioner in this story, going along with what Harry wants, but doing it in a resistant way that we might see as passive-aggressive. Remember, we said at the beginning of the story, she was best at her backhand. She's not complaining like the Israelites did to Moses, but she's not engaging. It's clear she doesn't want to be there, so why is she? It's easy to put all the blame on Harry, on the overfunctioner. I don't know if y'all relate to Harry. I kind of do. A lot of guys do. We tend to overfunction. But the reality is that Harry's wife could have taken her own self-differentiated stand when Harry wanted to improve her tennis game. She could have just said, no, I choose not to do that. How many times do we get caught up in situations we didn't ask for, going along with someone else's idea, usually the ideas of an overfunctioner, because we always have ideas, and we've not considered that we have a choice. You go back to the bridge story we started this series with. Is Harry handing his wife a rope? Does she take it? Is this story about her or about Harry? Is being on the court feeding his need, or is it helping her reach her own goals? You can't make someone else responsible. You can only make yourself responsible. You have the agency to choose whether or not to take on the ropes that others give you as well. No is a complete sentence. One of the things I've been saying in this series is that I think Jesus is the best example we have of a self-differentiated person. He's pretty clear about his mission and his goals. He doesn't overfunction. When the crowds want to make him king by force, after he feeds the 5,000 with 5 loaves and 2 fish, Jesus, instead of taking on their anxiety, taking on their need, he walks away. In effect, he says no. He knows this isn't his mission. When would-be disciples want to follow him, but with conditions, Jesus lets them go. He's not out there forcing people to be responsible for their lives and faith, but he's pointing the way to be responsible by teaching and by his example. And he lets others decide whether or not they want to follow. He's focused on his own personhood, and by doing so, he helps others find themselves as well. It's a contrast to Moses, to Harry, to all the overfunctioners out there. Jesus isn't trying to motivate the unmotivated with more insight and effort, but by demonstrating the way to life and inviting others to follow. Consider your own relationships. Where are you overfunctioning or underfunctioning? Either trying to make others responsible or letting others decide for you what you will do with your life. Are you exhausted from keeping too many balls in the air? Well, that story gives that a different take, doesn't it? Or are you frustrated that someone else is playing a game you don't want to be part of? The point of this whole series is to remind you that you have the ability to choose how you will respond to the relationships and situations around you. To respond rather than react. To choose to live healthier patterns in your own life. Because when you do, you'll begin to see the systems around you change. It's not easy. It takes a lot of focus on thinking rather than letting your lizard brain react, but it's the way to health. I'm thankful for these fables, even though they hit me right where I live. Some of you have said to me over the last few weeks, Pastor Bob, it's like you're reading my emails, like you're talking right to me. And it's weird how you know what's going on in my life. And I want to tell you a secret. Here's the secret. Okay, every sermon that I preach is first for me. You just get to listen to me think out loud on Sunday morning. All this stuff applies, right? But I'm thankful for wise mentors like Edwin Friedman, like Moses, and especially Jesus, who show us a different way to live. Now, there are more fables for us to explore in this series. We're going to probably revisit this series again down the road with some new fables because I think it's been helpful. But in the meantime, may you go and learn to play the game of life in a way that gets you and those around you playing together in a healthy way. May it be so. Amen. And let us pray. As we do this morning, I want to invite you to think about your role. Where do you find yourself over-functioning or under-functioning? To what do you need to say yes and what do you need to say no? How does your mission in life drive you and help you to find peace?